So yeah, tell me about your story, who you are, your upbringing, like why you are the way you are now.
So I definitely just start with my testimony as, well, from the very beginning, we would go to like my mom. She was from Brazil. She moved from Brazil when she was 14 years old to Italy. And that's where she met my dad right before he deployed. He was in the military. And when he came back, he was like looking all over Italy for her. And then they fell in love and ended up having a beautiful baby girl, which is my sister.
Yeah, I love your sister.
I know, she's great. And then from there, they moved to Florida. And it was very rocky. So my dad had a hard childhood. My mom had a hard childhood. And it kind of leaded him to be, like, dependent on alcohol. He was in and out of jail. And there was, like, a lot of fighting and, like, a lot of conflict in my house. So through all of that, I didn't really have anything that I could, like, run to. Because when my dad wasn't around, my mom was working. She would leave at, like, 5 a.m., didn't come home till 9 o'clock at night. She was, like, pretty much the breadwinner for the house. So my sister pretty much had to step in and be that mother role for us. Mm-hmm. And my dad ended up passing away when I was about 9 years old. And just being able to even have, like, forgiveness for them, that was something that drew me closer to God, knowing that they're just people doing their best. Mm-hmm. Yeah, and when my dad was alive before he passed away, he was an atheist, and he would always try to get me to not believe in a God. So my mom knew of God, but her parents were really, like, strict and hard on her and made it like the you're going to hell kind of parents raising, like, if you do that, like, God's not going to accept you, he's not going to love you. So from that shame, she kind of ran from God even more. And then my dad was there too, also saying, like, you know, it's science. Science is what we believe in. Like, there's no God. And I was like, yes, there is. I know there's a God. And I had that peace, like, as a young girl. Just, I was like, no way there's not. Because with all the fighting, with all the anger in this home, with all the craziness, I still have so much peace. And that pretty much led, well, then after he passed away, my mom ended up getting in a relationship and marrying our neighbor, my stepdad now. Aww. And he was the one that actually brought us into church for the first time. Aww. He was such a good man, so calm, so gentle, so kind, so loving. He was like the first light that we got to see and what it's supposed to look like when someone loves Jesus and someone loves God. And shamelessly, like, wanting to be the man, wanting to lead, and wanting to provide and take care of us. And from there, I ended up meeting my first boyfriend, and he was in love with God. He loved God so much, and since I was young still and didn't really understand, because I knew of God, I believed in God, but I definitely didn't have him, like, in my heart, because I never took the time to read his word. Yeah. I never took the time to read the Bible, so I didn't know. I just knew there was a God. Yeah. And he wanted to do everything the right way. He wanted to wait till marriage. He didn't want to listen to, like, all the rap, all the bad music. He didn't want to watch things that were inappropriate. And especially the waiting till marriage thing was so hard for me. And being in a person who doesn't know God, I didn't understand, like, the sanctity of marriage. I didn't understand what it was meant for, to, like, save yourself for marriage. And so it was so pointless to me, and it made me have so much, like, anger towards him. I didn't want to accept God's truth. I didn't want to open my heart to him, and eventually that led to the relationship ending. But so the relationship ended, but God was still there, and it really pushed me to step into a relationship with God on my own. Like, I ended up going to church by myself. I ended up reading the Bible on my own. And that was early high school. And I actually ended up meeting my best friend also, which she was an atheist. And she always asked me, like, why are you so happy? Why are you so happy? Why are you so happy? And I was like, Jesus, it's God. But I was taking advantage of God's grace. Mm-hmm. I had accepted Jesus. I had knew Jesus. I was claiming Jesus, but I was so lukewarm and living completely different. Like, if you looked at me, you would be like, no way that girl's a Christian, because of how I was acting. And that was so confusing for her, because she grew up in a house where her parents believed in like mini gods. And I was claiming that there's one God and that it's only Jesus and that he's where joy comes from and all these things. And she was like, if that's the case, then why are you doing this stuff? Like, why are you acting like that?
Wow.
Yeah.
That's powerful.
Oh, yeah, definitely. And she had my back, and she was the only one that would ask me those hard questions. Because a lot of us, we don't take a second to think about what we're doing. We just live. We don't think about our actions. We don't think about our thoughts. We don't think about the habits that we're creating. Mm-hmm. We're not concerned with building fruit in our lives.
Yeah, it's very true.
Take a second to breathe. I'm like holding my breath. Yeah, so from there, I ended up getting in relationships for the wrong reasons. And so it started my career in modeling. So I started flying out to Miami every other weekend. And I started meeting all these people, being in these environments. I felt so cool. I felt like it was the best thing ever. My followers were blowing up. And it was all because I was posting my body. Yeah. And I was using the looks I had and the gifts that God gave me to make my brothers and sisters stumble. And I didn't even think twice about it. And it led to me having really fruitless deeds, and it led me to hardening my heart. My heart was hardened where I didn't care what it was doing to people who saw. I didn't care what it was making other people think, or if it was making someone covet or lust. That wasn't in my thoughts at all. Mm-hmm. And I ended up getting in a relationship with my manager, and I helped manage this girl's OnlyFans page. Mm-hmm. And I got to see so much, like, people's minds and just how much lust there was.
Oh, yeah.
Like, so much lust, and no one really cared about you. It was just what you can give them. And I remember asking my boyfriend at the time, because he was telling me to get an OnlyFans.
Wow.
And I was like, you don't mind people seeing me like that?
Yeah.
Like, you don't mind people looking at me that way? He was like, nope, I don't care at all. It's about the money.
Wow.
Like, literally telling me, like, you make good money from it. It's okay. And he was even...
That is nuts.
Yeah, right? And so that being said, he was a manager. Mm-hmm. Like, so I dated my manager. So he had all of these girls. And I would ask him, like, how do you not, like them?
Yeah.
Like, you're alone with them, you see them. Like, that doesn't make you feel any type of way. And he was so desensitized. He's like, no, a butt's just a butt. A body is just a body.
Wow.
Yeah.
No, I just meant to say wow and what, because I'm just so shocked.
Wow.
Yeah,
and it's just a pretty face. Like, it means nothing. And I was like, no way. There has to be more than that.
Yeah.
I was like, we are not just a pretty face. And that led me to really starting to just open my heart more to God. Because he was knocking. Like, God was knocking. I would feel the conviction in these, like, tiny little outfits I was wearing. Like, the things that, because eventually he started posting for me.
Oh, no way.
Yeah, and he managed my own Instagram. So I wasn't even posting.
Know that.
Yeah, it was like all him and like the videos that he took behind the scenes. And there was one that he posted and you could like pretty much see everything.
Wow.
And I deleted it so fast. I was like, I can't. Like, I can't do that. Like, I can't show everybody what I have going on.
Yeah.
And it's funny because in high school when I first started and I was first starting to post like that, I had a teacher pull me aside and she was like, honey, do you know that this is going in these guys' spank banks? Oh, and I was like, first I was like, what's a spank bank?
What are you talking about?
Yeah, I'm a young girl. I don't know what that is. And then it was like that animosity. Like, who are you to tell me? Like, who are you to tell me how to live my life? Like, now I see that she was just looking out for me. And it means like a lot that she was trying to get me to respect myself almost. Like, you're worth so much more. You don't need to be posting your body to be liked. You don't need to be successful in this way. There's other ways to do it. And after he was telling me that it was okay to get an OnlyFans, I ended the relationship like a week later.
Oh, really?
Yeah.
Good for you. Because a lot of girls stay.
Yeah, I was like...
I was definitely one of those girls, and I bit me in the butt, so...
I was like, okay, so I'm going to come here. And it was like a leap of faith because, like I said, I managed that girl's OnlyFans too, and that's all I had going for me. And I had to eventually leave that job too because the conviction was so much.
Yeah.
Because people thought they were talking to her, they were talking to me. And it was like, tell me how, like, tell me that you're turned on or this. And I was like, how's your day going?
Literally.
I was like, do you go to church?
Yeah, and it really infiltrates your mind. Even if it's not you doing it, like you are the one that posted, like it was in your account, right? They thought they were talking to the other girl, but they're talking to you.
Yeah.
And so it like really affects your mind, and it makes you feel really convicted and dirty in a way, because even though they didn't know it was you, it's just very hard. And that's something I want to say about OnlyFans is that a lot of times it's not even the girl that you're thinking you're talking to, it's somebody else. Sometimes it's even a dude, because that's who's managing their account, and it's nuts.
Yeah, it really is. And it made me see too, like, what it was doing to her. Like, she had like a lack of self-confidence, and it was because the people that wanted her attention and wanted her time, it wasn't for like, hey, let me take you on like a date. And if it was like super creepy.
Yeah.
Like, I hate saying that about people, but you know, it was just all for the wrong reasons. And I was very straight up like about why I was leaving. I said, hey, look, I'm really getting convicted by God. Like, I think I need to take my relationship with him seriously. And we ended up parting ways, and I want the best for her. Like, I have so much love for her and who she is. Like, and I understand, like, people who do fall into that and they're in the position, I understand, because can you blame us? Like, that's what the world teaches us. The world venerates that kind of mindset. The world glorifies and applauds sin. What we watch is sinful. What we listen to is sinful. Like, we don't take a second to go, is that honorable, or is that bringing goodness? Is that bringing faithfulness? Like, what is this teaching me? And we're not honest with ourselves a lot of the times. We just take it in, and we're consumers.
It's extremely normalized. It's so and kind of what you said earlier, like, your boyfriend at the time was desensitized. They don't realize like how bad it's gone. It's so normalized that's what's going on.
Yeah, I'm like, and it just makes you feel, because I'm like, when you see me like as my husband, like, it should be wow, like a boob.
Yeah.
And that's the only one ever. Like, if a guy, or even women, if we can like look at a body and like a person and just be like,
yeah,
like, what are people to us?
Exactly.
Like, that has no value. And especially as women, we're supposed to have value. Like, I saw this video of this older man, and he was talking about everything that costs, everything that's of value, it's hidden. Diamonds, oil, like, we have to go searching for it. It's not right there on the surface. And that's just started making me recognize, like, okay, I am the daughter of a king. Like, Jesus covered me. I don't need to do these things. I need to just walk in my purpose and walk in what God has for me. That came with a lot of pain. It came with a lot of trials, and it took a lot of time for me to learn that, but I'm glad I did, because after leaving Miami, leaving OnlyFans, all of that stuff, I was able to get a job where I could actually shine Jesus' light for the first time without being overwhelmed with conviction.
Yeah.
Like, it was so heavy.
That was awesome. That's awesome, because I feel like in our industry, we always felt conviction. And so you saying that just made me... It was crazy.
Yeah, it was so heavy. And now I'm like in this job where it ended up being a real estate position, and I was like a transaction coordinator, and I was able to shine God's light, and it wasn't my body. Like, I was dressing modestly, well, starting to, still wearing a lot of like tight stuff, but I was learning, and that's like, there's that curve, that learning curve, and God has grace, and you know, so I was really able to shine God's light there and just be confident in God, and like, not feeling like a hypocrite either. Like, I was able to be like, God is this, like, apply this word, because I was actually applying it to my own life. And where God's at work, so is the enemy. From there, I ended up getting in a relationship with someone that I had been friends with my entire life, like, literally grew up with him. And to say the least. After like 2 months, it ended up being like the worst relationship ever. I have nothing against him. Like, I get it. I understand. Like, but a lot of growing, and a lot of pain. That relationship taught me how to be so dependent on God, and also taught me that God is your only source.
Yeah. Amen.
Yes, amen. Putting your faith and trust in a person will always leave you disappointed and unfulfilled, because at the end of the day, that person is also just a human and a sinner, just like me. And that is not my main source of joy. That's not my main source of contentment. You are not my source of peace, my source of love or joy or anything on those lines. You can't be. You're, to an extent, absolutely. Like, that's something that we should be doing for the people that we're in a relationship with. But not being my source, because you will let me down. You're not perfect. And to put all that, and that's pressure too. I don't want to ever put so much pressure on someone where you have to make me happy. That's on you. Like, I feel like that's just so unreasonable, and it's not fair.
It's unrealistic.
It's unrealistic, exactly. God ended up delivering me from that relationship, and it took time, but in his timing, I ended up really cutting it off, like, and being able to move on. And I was like, this is not healthy. This is not good for me. And this is honestly leading me away from God and not towards God. And I think a lot of the times people stay in relationships that aren't good for them because they're not taking the time to see what fruit it's producing. I think that's what we should be doing in not just our relationships, but in our jobs, in our friendships, in everything.
In finances, literally everything.
Like, if it is from God, it's going to come with peace. It's going to come with affirmation. It's going to come with, like, that contentment and joy and all of his fruit. But if it's from the enemy, it's going to come with anxiety, depression, anger, lust, jealousy, envy, greed, and so on.
Like,
write that down. So after that, I actually ended up getting an opportunity to work at my church here in Claremont. And that was the biggest blessing I have ever had in my life.
I first saw you.
Yes, I was actually able to see what it meant to be a Christian. It wasn't, I'm a Christian. I'm going to go do whatever I want, party on the weekends, praise on Sunday.
Yep.
That's not what it was. It was, I'm a Christian. That means I want to honor God. I want to honor God with my life. I want to know my why, know my purpose. I want to pull people from drowning, save people from their sins, like tell people about Jesus, apply the word of God, and actually being able to see it. It was like, wow, they are out here. Because 90% of the people that I met, it was like, I'm going to say I'm a Christian, but I'm going to do whatever I want, and I'm going to treat you bad, and I'm not going to care about you. And it almost makes you feel so alone, because you're sitting here trying to do these things in your life, and you just have nothing but, like, adversity. There's so much adversity coming from left and right. In that last relationship that was hard for me with my friend, I remember trying to tell them all about God and, like, just tell them about the gospel, and they would all make fun of me. Like, I would sit there, and sometimes my ex would wait. Like, I would tell him something alone, and he wouldn't say anything. And he would wait until we're all around all of his friends, and then he would bring it back up and be like, can you believe she said this? This is what she believes. And then so just sorry. laugh at me. And I was like, you guys are the problem. It's not me, because I don't have this much anger and, like, hate in my heart to even do this to a person. Like,
and you're so genuine and loving. I can't even imagine.
It's okay, because Jesus already said that this would happen. He's like, the haters are gonna hate. They hated me first. They're gonna hate you.
Yeah, exactly.
But being in an environment where I was like, wow, I'm not the only one, and then being able to serve and to learn and to actually know, like, what it really looks like to be in a community, what it really looks like to have fellowship and to be surrounded by like-minded people and being like the body of Christ, being one with each other, was the most just amazing. It brought me to tears so many times, because I went from crying myself to sleep every night to crying with joy and praising the Lord at church and feeling like I have people in my life. And then meeting you, I got to not meet you, but meet you again, because we were different people.
We did meet each other again. Like, we were transformed. I met you, and it was a different person. It's not who I remembered or I saw on social media. We were truly different people and wanting and like having a different purpose. We just had a glow, or you had a glow from within, and I was like, tell me like how.
Oh, thank you, Gabby. That was so sweet. And and then from there, me and you just got closer, and I actually had a sister in Christ. Like, well, my best friend was also there, but we grew. We ended up starting a Bible study and meeting every Wednesday, and it just. Now look at us. Now we have a whole podcast that we're starting together.
It's been so amazing, and just I feel so blessed. Whenever I was lost and in the gutters, I genuinely was praying to God for months and months. Like, I think 4 months. I was like, I just need a godly friend. I really do. I don't know what to do anymore. I feel so lost. I have nobody to talk to besides my boyfriend. But he's amazing. He's literally like God sent. I love him so much. But you also need your girlfriends.
Yes,
and I was
definitely
praying to God. I was like, I need community. I need a godly woman. And I remember when we met up for coffee, I was smiling from ear to ear when I left, and I called Ricky, my boyfriend, and I was like, God just answered my prayer. Like, I just know that Ariana is going to be a sister in Christ and somebody that I can go to for my like, you know, whenever I need to vent to somebody, or whenever I'm in a situation or a problem, or just tell them my accomplishments. Like, she's going to be there. And I was just so happy that God answered that prayer. And like, now we built a whole community of girls that are just so confident in who they are and their purpose, and like share the love of Jesus together. It's been so amazing.
I'm so thankful. I am so thankful, because it's like day and night.
Yeah.
It's literally light and darkness.
Yeah.
I can look back and I could clearly see what it's like living on my own and leading myself.
Oh, yeah.
And now when it's like letting Jesus lead. And it's the most amazing thing. And now that I'm not taking advantage of God's grace and doing whatever I want, and saying like, I need to do what you called me to do. I need to actually be about what I say and not just do whatever I please, and know that my obedience is tied to someone else's salvation.
Whenever you said about being lukewarm, it really hit me. And I feel like it's going to hit a lot of people, because, you know, we say that we're Christian, but we can't love one God and do the other. Like, we can't have two masters. We're going to love one and hate the other. And I remember this, that reminds me of a story when I was living in Miami, and literally the night before I was partying, and then the next morning I was listening to worship music in my apartment, and I was like jamming out, like I was like, you know, so happy, and my roommate was like, oh, did you like mean to put this on? Like, do you listen to this stuff? And I was like, yeah, I'm actually a Christian. She was like, oh. And my heart, my heart sank, because I was like, oh, am I not representing God the way that I should be? How do people not know I'm Christian? It's like, and I started thinking, if you were to take off your bio, your the scripture in your bio, or if you weren't wearing hoodies that says Jesus, or if you weren't telling people you love Jesus, would they know that you're a Christian? Exactly. Would they know, like, from the fruits of your spirit that you're a Christian? And I obviously wasn't living that out. And that really reminded me of that story, because I remember her saying that, and I was like, oh my goodness.
Wow.
I haven't been living out the way I should be. So, yeah.
That's so true. That's literally like that same thing, like me being so excited to show my best friend fresh off the plane from Miami, so excited to show her all my new content, and she looked at it and was like, isn't that for the bedroom?
Oh no.
And I'm like, wow. You know, my body's art. I worked hard for this body, but no. And then I'm sitting here saying, I love God. We would go to church every single Sunday. Wow. When I wasn't in Miami, we went to Sunday. That was our routine, was clubbing Saturday night, church on Sunday, and then getting breakfast and having and just doing whatever. And like, smoking weed and just living this degenerate life that we're just loving so much, like literally rejoicing in our sin. I literally just didn't think about it, and I was like, it makes me so thankful that we have the God we have.
Yeah.
He is so loving towards us. He's so patient with us. He will let you run as far away, but he will always stay running after. He will always knock on the door. And God is a gentleman. Yep. God does not beat on your door. He knocks politely and he waits for you to open the door. He's not sneaking in through your window. He's not doing anything. Like, we have free will, and he wants us to choose him. He wants us to say, God, I love you enough, and thank you for what you have done for me. Thank you for the breath in my lungs that's borrowed. Thank you for your son on the cross bearing the punishment that I deserved. He wants us to choose that and to walk in that on our own. Because if he were to force us, because he could, he's God. He could, easily. But then he would have robots, and nothing would be genuine.
It's kind of like the prodigal son where, it's the two sons, and one of them gets the inheritance and runs off and spends all their money in wild living, partying with girls, all this stuff. And there was a famine in the place where he was living, and he just wanted to come back home. He didn't have anywhere to live. He didn't have any food, and he was like, I know my dad would pay the farmers like food, right? And then he was like, let me just go ask him if I can work for him. And so when he comes back, and he's scared, and his dad's with open arms there, and he's like, no, let's get the best robe, slay the toughest, like
the fattest calf.
The fattest calf. And instead, we always think that he's going to reject us and be mad at us, and it's like, no. He wants us to fix our eyes on him. Do not look left and right. He just wants us to go back again, because the enemy loves when we have shame and guilt, because he can use that shame and guilt to keep us away from God. And it's like, no, don't let the enemy do that to you. Go back to God, because he is there waiting for you with open arms.
And I know too, like, if we didn't have the experiences that we experienced, we wouldn't truly know how good God is. That's like, we don't truly enjoy summer until the winter comes and you're freezing, or vice versa, depending on the kind of person that you are. And I love that story because it says that the father saw him while he was still a long way off.
Wow.
He loved him. He was waiting for him. He cares. And it's funny because so many of us are that brother that has gone astray and has just done whatever we please. But then there's another brother in that story who's loving and loyal and has never turned their back on his father. And he hears the party going on inside, and he refuses to go in. He's so angry, and he asks one of the servants, and he's like, what's happening? He said, well, your brother has returned, and your father has killed the fattest calf and thrown a feast for him. He got so furious that he wouldn't go inside, and the father comes outside, and the father is supposed to depict God, He comes outside, and he says, why are you angry, my son? He said, I have never left you. I have always been obedient to you, and you haven't even given me a young goat to celebrate with my friends. Which, pause. Imagine us being like, Dad, where's my goat? What's wrong with you? But I just love what the father says. He says, my son, like, what I have, it's already yours. Everything I have is yours. But we should be joyful because your brother was lost and now he's found. He was dead and now he's alive again. The Bible talks about how we're dead in our transgressions. And it's not death like we're dying. It's that spiritual death. Like, when you start watering sin, it says, the Bible talks about the heavenly, like, God is not the one that tempts anyone. He cannot be tempted, nor does he tempt anyone. But we're tempted when we're dragged away by our own evil desires and enticed. And when desire conceives, it gives birth to sin. And sin, when it's full grown, it gives birth to death. So when we have that thought, because we don't just sin, like, the devil's crafty. He just plants the seed. He says that whisper, like, you deserve it. Go ahead. It's just one more drink, or it's just sex, or it's just another bite of cake and I'm already full, and we don't even think gluttony is a sin. Like, it comes in such small forms. Like, we try to dismiss even the little sins, but those sins, like, when you water them, you start to create habits and cycles. And it's so much easier to fall into that because you're not taking the time to work on your armor. you're not taking the time to strengthen your spirit. So it's so much easier to like fall.
Yeah.
So much easier to be dead in your transgressions. Like it separates us from God, and it weakens us because we're so busy strengthening our flesh that our spirits are so weak.
Yeah.
And that's when you're beautiful on the outside, but your spirit is ugly.
Exactly. And it reminds me of, like, for example, if we were to break up with a boyfriend and to cheer your friend up or me up, a lot of the times people be like, let's go out and party and let's go find a guy for you. And that's how it is. Like, once you water sin, you think it's okay because you deserve it. Like you said, like, we think we deserve this. We find ourselves and lead ourselves into destruction. It's kind of when we are surrounded by a community like that, it's like the blind leading the blind. The blind leading the blind. It's really sad and very, you don't realize that's what you're getting yourself into until you're really deep down. You start doing things that you never thought you were going to do. And to touch on OnlyFans, that's something I experienced because, you know, friends, a few of my friends were starting an agency to support them. I was like, okay, I'm down to do it, but I'm only going to post what I have on my social media. It's not going to be anything vulgar or provocative. And they were so down with it. And I was like, okay, bet, like, I'm going to make a lot of money. And at first I did, just because I posted about it. I was like, oh, I'm doing, OnlyFans, whatever. And people were blowing it up, like, paying the subscription. But then when they realized that I wasn't posting what they thought I was going to post, they started unsubscribing, and they would even comment on my post on Instagram saying, your social media is better than your OnlyFans. But the thing is, that's crazy, is that the people managing my account were saying, you're not going to make money just by posting this. You have to do more. And they really try to push you to do more. And thank God I got out of that, because I couldn't handle it. Even if you're not posting on there like vulgar and stuff, like provocative stuff, the conversations that your manager has with these people it makes you feel so convicting, so just bad about yourself. I just knew that this wasn't my purpose, and I had to leave. And I also, after was like, okay, I'm not gonna do it, but I'll manage other girls, because it's not me, it's just me managing other girls. And kind of what you were, I was telling you earlier, it's like, even if you're managing for other girls, it still gets in your head. You feel disgusting because you're the one creating these messages to send out to them, and it doesn't feel good. It makes it seem really, really just aggressive.
Yeah, and it normalizes it, exactly how we were talking about. And it goes back to the eyes and the ears are the lampstands of the body. So if we're taking that stuff in and we're allowing it to shape our perspective, shape our opinion, shape our mind, shape the way we talk, because I don't know if you noticed that, but I would start wherever I was, start talking like that, or just normalizing it. And same thing, we both have been raised in a very small town. So when they would see us posting these things here in Claremont, it was like, whoa. Yeah. Well, this is crazy.
Yeah, they're like, what are these girls on? And this is, a lot of guys were like, this is awesome. But it really startled a lot of people. Yeah. We got a lot of attention here, but not the right attention.
Yeah. And then when we go to Miami, everyone's doing it. Now we feel comfortable. The Bible talks about how we go where our itching ears want to hear. We go where we're accepted. We go where we won't be corrected. Because we run from growth. Because growth takes pain. It takes discomfort. It's not fun. It's not pleasurable. And thinking about America, we're on the pursuit of happiness. And happiness is based off what's happening. So many of us fall into the lie and listen to the lie that the more you have, the more happy you'll be. Or if I get this, this, and this, then I'll be. But until you fill that hole with God, because we all have a God-sized hole in our hearts, and until you know that none of this will fulfill you, none of this is going to bring you that peace and that comfort and that joy and that salvation for your souls. The Bible talks about how God jealously longs for the Spirit that He caused to dwell in you. He cares. Our bodies are the temple for the Holy Spirit. And when we're not honoring it, and we defile it, and we don't care, and we're just showing it off, that's just not only setting a bad depiction of God and what He's done for us, it also doesn't do good on us. the Bible also talks how about a good name is better than like fine perfume.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah, and that's not really earning us a good name
Yeah,
either.
no, and I say that feelings are deceiving. Just because if I did everything I felt like doing, I would probably be dead. Feelings are a good indicator, but they are not supposed to dominate you.
And lead you.
Yeah, and lead you. And kind of, you know, whenever I wanted to go out, I felt like my sexiest in the beginning to wear the tightest clothing. But when I went out and saw, I would see the girls that got the most, the girls that looked the most beautiful were the most elegant, the ones that were clothed, that they were just so beautiful. They didn't feel the need to show off what they had. And I was over here with my tight clothes, and I wasn't even comfortable. I didn't like what I was wearing, but I wore it because I thought it looked sexy at the time. And that's not what I was supposed to be doing, because I would look at these girls and I would be like, I would admire them. I'm like, how? Like, yeah.
And that just goes back, a couple weeks ago in our Bible study talking about the characteristics of a woman of God. And one of the ones that stuck with us the most was beauty fades, but a woman that fears the Lord lives forever.
Yeah.
And is praised. And I love the verse in the Bible that says, what is it to gain the whole world, but to forfeit your soul?
Oh, yeah.
It's so easy to get caught up in having more, wanting more. Our desires take over us. When the desire conceives, it gives birth to sin.
Yeah.
And we don't mind what we have to do to get there.
Yeah, and the thing about forfeiting your soul, forfeit means to lose something because of something you're doing. And the thing about us is that our human flesh, we hate the fact that God is God, because that means we are not God. And so we can't have control in our life, because our desires, our feelings, they can be very dominating, and we can feel angry, we can feel happy, we can feel whatever it may be, but sometimes they're not supposed to dominate you. If you get angry and it's probably not something to, you know, have a big deal over, and you're just like having a tantrum. I was literally having a conversation today, and I was saying that, you know, you might have a very valid point in your argument, but if you're over here wailing and screaming, trying to get your point across, it's going to disqualify everything you're saying. Instead of just be calm. I know you feel angry, but just because you feel angry doesn't mean you have to scream to get your point across. Once you're calm, you can really get your point across the way you want it to get across.
Yeah, it's that instant gratification that we try to run to. Like, we don't have, our culture looks down on even that delayed gratification. When we want something, we want it now. And exactly what you were saying, like with our feelings, even to be heard and wanting it now, like we can be right about something, but then the way we go about it is all wrong. But I also want to have time to hear your testimony, you know.
Of course. So my testimony, I feel like, is my identity being wrapped around social media, my appearances, and what other people thought of me. But we'll start from the beginning. And my family migrated here when I was 2 years old with my brother and sister from Colombia. And they had no plan. They just knew that they wanted to come here. There was a lot of stuff going back in Colombia, in our hometown, and they got to the airport in Miami and was like, okay, this is it. They didn't know the language. They didn't know anyone. They didn't even have a lot of money. And we lived in cars and hotel rooms, and I was so young at the time, but I understood, like at the age of 4 or 5, I saw my parents struggle, and my dad got into construction, into the painting business, but he was learning at the time how to paint, and he would take any job, even if he didn't know how to do it. He would be like, do you know how to paint a house? He's like, yeah, I know how to paint a house. He had to YouTube it the whole time and everything. Like, he did not know what he was doing. And I just remember watching my dad walk in through that front door, and I would scream in happiness, and I would take off his shoes. And at that time, I didn't realize how exhausted he was, because his eyes were bloodshot red of all the fumes, of all the stuff that goes on in the construction sites. And he seemed so exhausted, but he would make time for me and my sister still. But I saw that he was exhausted, and I didn't realize what was going on until later, and I saw my parents as the most amazing people in my life. They were my superheroes, and I definitely do still see them like that. They're so influential and amazing. I love them so much. But with that being said, I see them with different lenses, and only because they're human, right? We're, like you said, we are living this life for the first time. They're learning as they go, like you and I are, and we have made mistakes. They have also made mistakes, and those mistakes have wounded me long term. But by the grace of God, my family has been transformed, their hearts, their minds, their ways, by Jesus. If it wasn't for Jesus, I think our family would have been falling apart. There was a lot of marital issues in my parents, in our home, that caused a lot of destruction. And my mom ended up having cancer when I was in 6th grade, so I was like 11. And then she got cured. She had stage 4 cancer. Oh my goodness. And then she went into remission, and not shortly after, my brother passed away. And I remember when that happened, we could not leave our sides. We would sleep together, us four, in a bed for weeks, because we couldn't fathom the fact that we can lose each other so fast and so quickly, and we were just so scared, and we just held each other tight. We would wake up in the middle of the night just crying because we couldn't believe that happened. And so, my mom's cancer and my brother's death, it caused a lot of more confusion and more sorrow in our family. And the enemy loves to take that and try to divide us, right? Yes. And he hates union, he hates marriage, and he hates family. And you see that a lot in America now. Divorce is so common. Yeah. And he was really trying to do that with my family. He was trying to break us apart. And like I said, from the grace of God, I'm so happy that they're still together and they have been transformed. But with all the sorrow and the things that I saw going on with my family, I had really low self-esteem, and I was a huge people pleaser. I think everybody comes into this world wanting to be liked, and that's how I was in high school. I wanted to be liked. Nobody wants to be hated. You want to be talked about in a good way. You want people to think you're cool. You want all this stuff, but sometimes to be liked, you have to start compromising your morals and certain values, and that's exactly what I did. But I had really low self-esteem, and my self-esteem was on the floor. My self-confidence, everything was on the floor. I never thought I was smart enough. I never thought I was athletic enough. I would literally try out for sports, and I would show up and not even try because I felt like I wasn't going to make the team. But I'm like, hey, at least I was trying. You showed up. That's good. And yeah, with school, I didn't think it was that was that for me. I didn't know what my plans were going to be after high school. And I remember something so vividly. We were taking the SAT exam, and I was already super nervous to take the exam. And my mind would blank during exams. Like, I was always getting so nervous and in my head. And I already felt like I was going to do bad. And so the teacher that was proctoring the exam was passing out the supplies, the materials, and he skipped me. And I raised my hand and I said, hey, I need this, and that. And he said, oh, yeah, that's okay. You probably don't need it anyways because you're not going to pass. So it's probably not going to make a difference. Wow. And when I tell you, my stomach dropped to the floor. My heart sank. All the kids started laughing at me. Some looked at me with pity. And I was so sad because in that moment, not only did I know that I wasn't smart enough or think I wasn't smart enough, the other kids didn't think I was smart enough, and my teacher doesn't think I was smart enough. So I went home that day and I was so sad, and I started looking at things and finding things that I was good at. And just honestly though, that you have to be full of love, and because you never know what somebody's thinking. You never know what somebody's going through. And so what that teacher said to me really made me do a turning point that led to like a downfall. And so I started looking at things that I was good at, like what can I do? And I remember scrolling through my Instagram and I saw that there was this photographer shooting a bunch of girls in my town that he was taking the most beautiful pictures of them, and they were just beautiful. And I was like, if I can take pictures like that, then I will be liked. Then people will like me, and then I will, like, you know, I was a people pleaser, and that's what I wanted. I wanted people to like me. I felt like I never fit in. And so I messaged this photographer impulsively, and I was like, what do I have to do? What are your rates? Well, how do I go about this? This is my first time. And he said, you know, I'm actually shooting for a brand and I need models. You and your sister, I have a twin. You and your sister can go and shoot for this brand, and we can see where it goes from there. And so I get there. It's like a wholesome brand. It's like t-shirts and shorts, and there was one bikini in there, but I didn't think anything of it. I thought that was fine, whatever. And all the girls are doing it now. Like, all the girls are posting bikini pictures, and I wanted to be like them. I saw how much attention they were getting, and yes, I was girl. Like,
that was one of them.
Yeah, and I was like, I want to be like that. I want to go to these events. I want to have that many followers, and I just wanted to be liked overall. And so, but quickly over time, the pictures got really, really raunchy, very provocative, and I was putting out there something that wasn't who I really was. And so I would tell this photographer, like, hey, I don't really want to post this stuff anymore. I want to talk about different things. I want to post stuff about my, about Jesus, about fashion, other, fitness and all that stuff. And he was like, Gabby, this is the only way you're going to be famous, successful, and wealthy. You have to do all these things, and then once you get there, then you can talk about that. But right now you don't have a voice. You have to do this. And I was 17, 18 at the time. Like, I was like, oh, okay. And he was extremely judgmental. He would let me know if I was gaining too much weight, and he would let me know if I was getting too skinny. And he wouldn't want to film me. He would compare my sister and I a lot, and that was something that my sister and I dealt with a lot because we are twins. So whenever we met people, it was always like, which one's prettier, or which one's more athletic, or which one's smarter. So that was something we got used to, but it shouldn't be normalized, and it shouldn't be like, it was just really bad on our mental health. So whenever he would do it, we felt like one was prettier or one was more fit, and it was really hard on our mental health. And he was just judgmental overall, not just with us, but with other girls. He would be like, the Castro twins are starting to work out. You should also work out. And he would talk bad about my sister and I, like, we're gaining weight or we're getting too skinny. And he... I remember it was 6 girls. We were modeling for a brand, and I saw this girl and I thought she was so beautiful. She didn't even work out. Like, she had the most beautiful body, the most beautiful face, and he didn't want to shoot with her because she had cellulite in her legs. And he was like, I am not videoing you because you have cellulite. That's too hard to edit. And that's another thing. He would edit my pictures, all the girls that he would shoot with, like, all the pictures. And it got to a point where I literally had to start posting the unedited ones because he edited my stuff so bad that I was embarrassed to post it. I'm like, that doesn't even look like me. It looks like a goddess version of me. Like, it was crazy, and I did not want that stuff out there. And then you would go on my page and it was different, and then his page was like these, like, it looked really AI looking. Sorry. And so with all of that, he truly made me believe that that's the only way I was going to get successful, though. So I kept doing it. I kept shooting with him, and I kept shooting with other photographers, but it was very vulgar and provocative stuff, and I was getting the wrong attention. And so my following started blowing up. I started getting a lot of attention, And like I said, it was the wrong intention. It was from athletes and celebrities and famous influencers that kind of just wanted one thing. But since they were famous and I saw them on TV and social media, I was like on top of the world. I was like, this is awesome. I'm getting invited to these events, to these clubs, to these parties, and I'm hanging out with them. They're starting to become my friends, or at least so I thought they were. And I started traveling so much. And I started going to LA, and I started traveling to Miami a lot. And I started seeing little red flags. I started seeing things like evil and darkness that surrounded these environments. And I knew that Satan was at work, but I didn't want to believe it because I was in denial. I was living the best life. I was on yachts with these famous influencers, famous actors and singers and all these people, and I was like, I am living on cloud nine. I'm living in Miami because I ended up moving there, and I was like, this is amazing. But it wasn't until I moved there that I started seeing how evil everything was, and I started making friends and getting into relationships that weren't meant for me. And just to give you an example, there was a shooting in one of the nightclubs in Miami, and 3 people got shot and 1 person died. And I was out of town when this happened, but when I heard about it and I asked about it, I learned that the people in that club kept partying. Like, they didn't stop partying when they got shot. And not only that, but they club hopped with blood on their shirts of the people that got shot and the person that died. And when I asked, I was like, you guys didn't just go home? And their response was, shootings are gonna happen. What are you gonna do about it? Like, you have to move on. We have to get over it. And I was just so in shock. And I realized that there's so much darkness happening in these environments, because how can you keep partying with blood on your shirt of somebody that just got shot next to you? And I knew that I had to leave home because I was having friends that it was like the blind leading the blind. I would go to them for advice and they would give me the worst advice. I would go to them about my relationship advice and they'd say, why don't you go and leave him? We can go out and party, find a billionaire and go on their jet and travel the world. Or they'll say, oh, I know this guy thinks you're cute. Why don't we just go and travel with him on his jet? And it was always about what I can get from them. And I was like, no, this is the worst advice ever, because I love my boyfriend and I want to be with him. I want Christ-centered advice, because Christ-centered advice is going to be good advice because God is good. So I know that it's going to benefit me and it's going to help me instead of lead me to destruction and go traveling with a guy that wants nothing to do with me and just wants one thing from me, right? He just, once he has me, then done. He'll leave me in the trash. Like, I'm over after that, right? And I also ended up, but this was before I went to Miami, but I also got into a relationship that I really changed my values and I compromised my morals because I wanted to keep him. I wanted to think, I was wanting to be that cool girlfriend, and it bit me in the butt. Like, he brainwashed me into thinking that strip clubs was okay to go to. He brainwashed me into thinking that it was okay for him to have girlfriends that, like, girls that were friends, but he has slept with them before. And I wanted to be that cool, chill girlfriend that was like, oh, yeah, like, I don't care about that stuff. But deep inside, I knew that, like, shook me to my core, and it really broke me inside. And that's why we broke up, because it wasn't meant to be, and that wasn't who I was. That's not where my values were. And so once I did move to Miami, like I said, I saw a lot of darkness, and I decided to move back home, and I gave my life to Christ. That's when I met you and saw you again for the first time in so long. But the thing about getting baptized is that I knew that I had to change. And the one thing that I noticed when I was lost is that when I was driving and I would skip to the radio, and I would land on Z88.3 and they were singing like worship music or playing worship music, I had to change it so fast because I knew I couldn't face myself and the things that I have done. I couldn't face myself and deal with the fact that I was truly leading myself into destruction, that I was so lost and so dead inside. But once I gave my life to Christ, all those shackles, those chains fell off my body, and I began to glow from within. That hole in my heart was finally filled, and I am confident more than I've ever been in a really tight, cute outfit, or when I was posting my body on there and getting all these likes and all this attention. I have felt this confidence from within that I didn't have to prove myself anymore, because I understood that I was created and I just belonged because I was created for a purpose. And he created me the way that I'm supposed to be created. I don't need to prove myself to anyone anymore. And I went back to school, and I'm trying to get my doctorates. If it's in God's will, I'm trying to get my doctorates in physical therapy. And last semester, I finished with all A's. And I remember in my biology 2 exam when I got my first 100 ever, and I cried because I knew that it was God. Like, I didn't have that confidence in me before because I thought I wasn't like smart enough. And now that when I gave my life to Christ, it was a confidence that I've never felt before, that I knew that with him, I was just going to be, I would just succeed. And I was really scared also about talking in front of people. And now you and I lead a Bible study group of like ranging from 8 girls to like 20 girls, depending on their schedules and stuff. But now, even though I tremble before and I get a little nervous, we're leading that, and it's been growing. And now, we have a podcast and everything, and I'm just so grateful. And yeah, that's my testimony.
That's so great.
Thank
that's so
you.
beautiful. You can tell when God truly does something in someone's life because it's so evident. It's so clear. And going back to what you said, even about your teacher saying, planting that seed of doubt, that's kind of what people tell us, especially as young women, it's you're so pretty, you're so pretty, you're so pretty, instead of wow, you're so intelligent, or wow, you have so much potential in this, or you're so gentle and kind, and you're a hard worker, where that would lead people.
That is something I know that I'm going to do differently with my kids, because that's all I heard when I was growing up. Oh, darling, you look so beautiful today. Or you're so pretty. Oh, I love your outfit. And it was always my appearance. It was never like you said, oh, you're really good at this. You should explore this more. Or you're intelligent. Or you're so, insightful. You're so thoughtful. I would never got any different compliment. It was always about my appearance and how pretty I was, about my looks.
Yeah, it's funny because I was just having this conversation not too long ago about the words that we don't hear. Like being and working at Real Life, hearing the word leadership, something I never heard before. How often in a typical conversation do you hear the words integrity, strength, honor, discipline, courage, and all these things that we typically don't even second guess we don't even take the time to apply those or to see the value in those kind of words, but instead we talk about just meaningless talk. And the Bible even talks about how we'll be judged for every empty word. We say whatever we please, and I don't think even we realize how destructive, because it's sin, we don't realize how destructive our sin can be, even if it's small, how our lust, anger, envy, jealousy, how it can multiply and grow and hurt the people around us. And even hearing what you're saying, I got to a point when I was just wow, I'm a sinner. It's crazy how we don't even see.
We're so blind to the fact, and kind of going back on how often is it that we hear you're righteous or you're a leader? My conversations before I got saved was gossip. It was boy crazy filled conversations, and it was never something. it was always scratching the surface. It was never any kind of depth. And now that I have friends that, pour life into me, we don't gossip.
Mm-hmm.
We talk about things that are so, like, wholesome and beautiful, and like kind of just different things. It's different conversations. We pour life into each other.
Mm-hmm.
We'd never talk bad about another person. That's just never even a thought in our heads. And it's just crazy. Kind of, it's like how you said earlier, it's day and night.
Mm-hmm.
The contrast is different. It's really, really astonishing, I feel like.
Having the fear of the Lord, it's that respectful fear, like, because of who you are and your holiness. Like, and I understand that as a loving God and a holy God, that you can't stand in the face of sin. You can't just forgive me, because that would go against your character. That would go against who you are.
Mm-hmm.
That's why you had to send Jesus.
Yeah. No, I agree.
So when, you were dealing with everything with your brother and your mom, and was Jesus always brought up in your family, or how did you get to know the name Jesus?
So I feel like Jesus was like a distant cousin that would come visit. His name was always brought up, but I went to a church, and we ended up getting a lot of church hurt from it, because whenever my mom had the stage 4 cancer, the lady that founded the church told my dad that the reason that she got cancer is because she did something to deserve it. And that broke us, and obviously, that could have put a bad image in my mind as to who God was and everything. But I just always knew from a young age that people are just not perfect, and that God in her was just different. Like, who God was, I just knew he was good. The way I learned about Jesus, I think, was when I entered into high school, really. I think that me going to real life, and I went to I think it was student life, and I went and learned about him, but I was very lukewarm,
Mm-hmm.
And so, but I knew that he was good and he was loving and that he wanted me, but I ended up doing what I wanted to do. I think that's when I really learned who Jesus was. It was in student life, because that's the age where we want to rebel. And
Mm-hmm.
But I always had an inclination of wanting to learn more about God and learning about Jesus. And so when I went there and I learned about him, I was in awe, but things kept happening in my life that I kept running away from him.
Mm-hmm.
And it wasn't until now that I truly was like, okay, this is it. I have to give my life to Jesus.
Wow, that's so beautiful.
Yeah.
I can't believe that your mom went through that, and it's crazy how much church hurt there is. So many people are hurt by the church, and because they're not representing Jesus well. It's about religion and rules, and if you do this, then you'll be this. And the thing with sickness and hurt and pain and destruction in general, we live in a broken world. God created this world to be perfect. We sinned. It wasn't God. We sinned. We rebelled. We went against. And now you see that we living in a fallen world where there is hurt and there is sickness and there is disease.
Yeah.
And that's not how it was meant to be. That's why as Christians, we have something to look forward to. The Bible promises a new heaven and a new earth. And one day God will restore us and make us new and wipe away every tear. We're going to live in a world that doesn't have any heartbreak.
Yeah.
That doesn't have any of that.
Yeah, this lady also, this was, I think, why we left that church, was because she ended up using all the offerings to buy houses and mansions and for her own desires. So we ended up leaving. But my outlook on that was that we are all imperfect people. We cannot find perfect people in a church, in a relationship, in friendships, because we will always be disappointed. The only person that was perfect was Jesus, and that was thousands of years ago. So my outlook on people that have church hurt, because I have definitely gone through that, is that those people don't represent who Jesus was. And everybody's imperfect. and we all have fallen short from the glory of God some way or another. So you just have to have forgiveness in your heart and to understand the difference between who God is, who Jesus is, and who people are. Why we sin.
That's crazy, because people normally take, like, that's why people don't trust in tithing and giving to the church. But when you have trust in God, you don't look at people, because I'm doing what I'm called to do. I'm filling the storehouse with the 10% because I know God is faithful, and I'm faithful to the Lord. What you do with that is on you, and that's between you and God, because one day you're gonna die and you're gonna be confronted in front of Almighty Holy God, and we're gonna have taken account for the things that we've done.
I agree.
So with that being said, what would you say was your coming to Jesus moment?
My coming to Jesus moment was when I finally decided to move back from Miami and to move in again with my parents. I got home and I looked at myself in the mirror and I was like, enough is enough. I cannot do this anymore. I can't control my life. I can't control my career. I can't control my finances, my relationships, and my friendships anymore, because obviously I'm doing something wrong. And like I said earlier, when I was going through the radio stations, I couldn't face myself when it landed on Z88.3 because the conviction was so heavy. I knew that giving my life to Jesus meant to change. And so that day I looked at myself, I'm like, this is it. You're giving your life to Jesus. And the next day I did. That's when, that's when you...
And with, like, even saying that, it reminds me of the Bible verse saying the yoke of the world is heavy, but the yoke of Jesus, it's light. As the world is going 90 miles an hour, it's going at a sprint. God says, come take a walk with me. Walk. I have a plan to prosper you and not to harm you, plans for hope and a future. You just have to say yes. Say yes to God. Say yes to me, because I'm waiting with open arms.
I truly felt like God was just knocking on my door, and he was like, it's time. It's time to open up. You have been carrying this burden for way too long. Let me carry it and guide you in this path. I know it's been hard, but it's time. It's kind of like the prodigal son that we were talking about. He was like in open arms. And like I said earlier, when I went under that water, my shackles and chains just fell off. And I felt, like you said, the yoke was easy. It was light and it was beautiful. It was something I've never felt before. And yes, Jesus does say, like, we're going to have troubles in this life, but walking with him, it's going to be so much easier. You're going to have that unexplainable joy that when you're in chaos, you're just going to feel peace no matter what, because you know God is with you. And he always turns your disappointments, your anxieties, everything, your pain and your past, and turn it out and use it for good. Even if it doesn't feel like it in the moment, he will use it for good.
Wow. That's so good.
So what was your coming to Jesus moment?
I'd have to say that it was really looking back and being able to see God in everything. Being able to see he was there for every decision and every choice I made. Because with all the choices that I made when I was leading, it always led to pain. And when I was in that pain, he was the one that I always ran to. And he proved to be faithful. He, come to me, all who are weary, all who are heavy burdened, and I will give rest to your soul. And every single time he did.
That is so awesome.
And realizing that my standard for good was so different for what God's standard of good was. We can walk around in the street and ask people, are you a good person? And most people will say yes. And when you ask them why, it's because, well, I never killed anyone. I've never stolen or did this or did that. But yet, you've lied before. You've lusted before. You've had uncontrollable anger before. That means you've sinned. And the wages of sin is death. And on your own, your righteousness is like dirty rags to God. Thinking that you're going to get to heaven and say, okay, God, let me in. I'm a good person. And he's just like, no, actually, your sin separated me from you. And if you want to live a lifetime without me, you can expect to live an eternity without me too.
Yep.
And that's a choice. If I'm on a sinking boat and the lifeboat comes and they're trying to pull me in and save me, which is Jesus, and I'm like, no, I'm good. I'm just going to stay here drowning.
Yeah.
That's on me. God made a way. He always makes a way through everything.
Yeah.
And just seeing how good he was and knowing that when he says no, it's not a burden. Like the things that he says and commands us to do, it's for us. When we obey, it does nothing for God. It's for us. It saves us. That's why, like, wearing a seatbelt. The law is the law because it helps the government.
Yeah.
No, it's here to protect us.
Yeah.
Keep you safe, keep you from harm, because we're all like sheep that have gone astray. And we think about our enemy that we have. The Bible says your enemy, the devil, prowls around like a roaring lion, looking for someone to devour. And we are sheep, and we're like sheep without a shepherd. And Christ says he looks at us with compassion, and it fills his heart.
Yeah.
And he leads us. He wants to guide us. He is the good shepherd, and he cares about us. And he wants a relationship with us. And he's the creator, and we're the creation. Just like a mother wants a relationship with their child, and a father wants a relationship with their child, the creator, God the Father, wants a relationship with his children. And it breaks his heart when we think that we're fine without him. We literally wake up every day by his grace. And we have the audacity to say, I don't need you. And I honestly got to a point, too, where when I was reading the Bible, things would convict me so hard, and it would get me mad. I'm like, I don't like what I'm reading. I don't like what I'm hearing. But then it's like, who am I to tell God? Who am I? Dust, made from the earth, here one day, gone the next. Life is like a mist. To tell God what is good, what is right, what is moral. I don't have that ability to do that.
Yeah, we're not all-knowing. He is the one that is all-knowing. So that's why it says in the Bible, trust in me with all your heart and lean not on your own understanding. Because we do, when we don't know who God is and who Jesus is, we do what we think is right in our eyes. And what's right in our eyes could be actually extremely wrong. But we think it's right. And that's why you see, like, a lot of people say, my truth, my opinion, my this. It's because I believe in it, it should be true. But God put these things, like this Bible, for us as a guidebook, as a guide to in this really chaotic and crazy life, to help us, not just to make us feel like we're gonna do everything wrong and that if we sin we're gonna go to hell. But it's like he tells us not to have sex outside of marriage because we will be hurt. And you see that so much now. Imagine if every single person in this world followed what Jesus says about sex. Rape would be gone. Sex trafficking would be gone. Cheating and everything else would be gone. But no, people don't do that. And that's why Jesus says, like, the things that he says to is to protect us, is to help us. So, yeah, I agree.
It reminds me of that one verse that says, one way seems right to a man, but in the end leads to destruction. And I just love how consistent God is. He's the same yesterday, today, and forever.
Always.
His word remains consistent. All throughout generations, it seems that he's the one thing that always remains. And now we're trying to remove him from our society, remove him from our lives. And the less of God we have, the more depression we have, the more anxiety we have, the more drunkenness, all the things that we like to run to that we think. And even what's crazy to me is laziness. That's a sin. Who would have thought? And not doing the good that you ought to do. So many times we're like, wow, I should do that. And we just neglect it or we don't do it. It's like, oh, that's sin. So there we are, left with that fact that we are sinners in need of a savior. So I definitely say that was coming. I would definitely say that's my coming to Jesus moment.
What was the hardest challenge coming to faith?
I'd have to say it's that obedience. Because once you are obedient, now I have to change my habits. I have to cut off things that aren't bearing good fruit. And that pruning is so painful. I have to change my mindsets about things. I have to change how I treat people. And honestly, that selflessness. That's not easy at times too, because there's so many times where I want to say something or do something, and like I hear God saying, don't do that, or don't say that. And I have to just be obedient and swallow it while someone else is just thriving in their sin. But I realized over time that the enemy can bless people too. So really, it's not a loss. It's just a win in disguise. But it's really hard having that mental shift and loving what God loves. Because even the shows I watched and the movies that I watched, like in the music that I listened to, I had to change so much. But it's so rewarding. It's so beneficial, and it's good, and I can actually see good fruit now. What would you say?
Well, to add on to that, the pruning stage, I feel like, is when, his disciples were on the boat and there was a big storm. And they all started freaking out. They all thought they were going to die because obviously the storm was really bad. And they're fishermen, so they're used to this kind of stuff. So when they see a storm and they genuinely feel like they're going to die, they know what they're talking about. So when Jesus wakes up and he says, "You of little faith, what are you so afraid of?" It's because he's trying to expose something that they're afraid of. Jesus is right next to them, and they're scared they're going to die, knowing that Jesus is almighty, right? And so he's exposing the fear that they had, the doubt that Jesus was not going to help them. So the pruning stage is kind of like exposing things that you need to learn, that you need to get over, because with his disciples, they had this fear, they had these doubts, and to get over that, they had to get exposed to it, to move into the calling that God has called them to be. Right? So I feel like that's the pruning stage. Even though it sucks and it doesn't feel good right now, you have to go through it. And that's kind of my thing.
Oh,
no, go for it. Sorry, we can cut that off.
There's actually a verse in the Bible that says, every tree that does not bear good fruit will be cut down and thrown into the fire. And the one that does produce good fruit will be pruned even more to become more fruitful.
Wow.
I love that. Yeah, his eyes scour the earth looking for hearts that are fully devoted for him so he can reveal himself to us.
Wow. That is so beautiful.
I know, right? What would you say is probably your hardest thing coming to faith?
Embracing. Like, actually, kind of what I was saying earlier, like, actually embracing him and changing and accepting the fact that I was leading myself into true destruction. I was so lost. And I was just so distracted for so long that I knew that fixing my eyes on God meant that I had to change everything about myself and let go of things that I was holding on for so long and so tightly. And I was so scared, like, for example, my appearances, or what people said about me, or my following going down because of everything I'm changing. I'm not going to post the same stuff that I was posting before. And I kind of felt like when Moses led the slaves, the Israelites out of Egypt, and they wanted to go back because all they knew was slavery or bondage to being a slave. And that's what I felt like. I felt like I had this bondage to sin. I was a slave to sin. And it says that in the Bible. It says, for all those who sin are a slave to sin. So, and it kind of goes into the second point. I also struggled with spiritual warfare afterwards. Like right that day, I realized I understood what spiritual warfare was the day I got baptized. And I think that was one of my hardest challenges when I was coming to my faith, was realizing that there is spiritual warfare out there. And knowing that war and battles is not with flesh and blood, but with the spiritual realm. And that it didn't spook me. It was just I don't even know how to explain it. It was just a war in my mind. Like, I knew the enemy was coming for me, but that was confirmation that I did the right thing. Because when the enemy sees that you're about to switch sides, when you're about to go against him, he does not want to let you go. And how you said earlier that where God is, so is the enemy, and he's going to try to come after you. There's a verse in Luke chapter 12, verse 32 through 34, it says, "Do not be afraid, little flock, for your Father has been pleased to give you the kingdom. Sell your possessions and give to the poor. Provide purses for yourselves that will not wear out, a treasure in heaven that will never fail, where no thief comes near and no moth destroys. For where your treasure is, there your heart will be also." And it reminds me of like my heart being in this really dark place. My heart, it's in the appearances. It's in the materialistic things. It's what I can, my body. It was all these things, and that's where my treasure was. So when I gave my life to Jesus, my heart was in different. It was in a different place. And that's where my treasure is now. I know that now that my treasure is in heaven, where there's no thief that can steal, no moth can destroy. And I just, have to not be afraid.
That's so awesome that you can see that, because it's so tangible. It's so real. It's something that you can actually grasp and see. And going back to what you said about slave to sin, we're always a slave to something, because if you're not a slave to God, which is going to lead you to righteousness and purity and love and joy and peace and goodness and faithfulness, you're a slave to your sin. And that's so dark and so scary. And the flesh is at war with your spirit. It says, my spirit is willing, but my flesh is weak. That's why we have to take time to feed our spirit, to grow our spirit. Read your Bible, talk to God, learn what the Lord's will is for your life. And the only way to learn that is by knowing his word and knowing his voice. And how do you hear God's voice? Well, it's his love letter for us. That's what the Bible is. It's the word of God. And it's sharper than any double-edged sword, used for correcting, rebuking, training, teaching in righteousness, so that you may be thoroughly equipped for every good work. And it's like I've been able to test that. I've been able to test that he means what he says by actually applying it. And another verse that I love, he says, "It's not what goes into the body that defiles you, but what comes out."
Wow.
Because the overflow of the heart is where the mouth speaks. And you can tell what someone is full of. And if you're full of the world, that's when you have that anxiety, the greed, the anger, whatever it may be. And so many of us, especially as Christians, think that we can come to God with our cup already full. Or just having a little bit taken out. But God wants us to die to ourselves, and that's not easy. That means coming to God with an empty cup and saying, "Here, God, fill me, and out of your overflow, then I could give to people around me."
That's why it says in the Bible to guard your heart, because it is the wellspring of everything. So if our heart is polluted, everything else is going to be polluted.
That's so true.
Yes.
So what would you say is the most rewarding thing about coming to your faith and taking it seriously?
Meeting other girls that have gone through the same thing that I have gone through, or are going through the same thing, and feel like they have no way out, that they're too far gone. I love to see how God can work, or has worked in me, and able to call me to help them, and how I can call them out and call them for higher and tell them that you have a different purpose in this life than to show off your body, or to be in a relationship that changes you and destroys you, and where you're compromising your morals, or having company and community that are leading you into destruction. I can call them out and call them for higher, and pour life into them, and show them who they really are, because God did that for me, and I know that he can do that for others. And God will always show, or God will always use your pain in your past and use it for good and for his glory. And also, one of the most rewarding things is to truly finally being able to rest, and to not worry as much as I used to. I used to worry about so many things. But I've understood that his kingdom come, his will be done. And no matter what, his will is always going to come out on top. Like, I just know that his will hasn't finished yet, and it's going to happen. In Matthew chapter 11, verse 28, it says, "Are you tired, worn out, burnt out on religion? Come to me and you'll recover life. I'll show you how to take real rest." He says, "Come to me," but how many times have we gone to other things instead of him? He knows what you've done, and he will receive you even if you started the problem, or if you're on the other end of that problem, right? We've all felt that weight on our shoulders that we're not supposed to carry, and we're supposed to give that to him. So the word rest is actually one of the first words in the Bible. It's in Genesis chapter 2, verse 2, and I'm reading this just so I don't butcher it. But it says, "By the seventh day, God had finished the work he had been doing, so on the seventh day he had rested." Was God tired? Was he like, this was a lot of work? No, he didn't feel exhausted. He rested because the work of creation was over. It was done and it was fulfilled. It was finished, and God included the creation of fulfillment and contentment that he called rest. That's what rest was. And since he created us, and he's the one who takes care of us, we are content and we are fulfilled in him, because he takes our burdens and he takes our worries. We put our burdens onto him. So yeah, that's my biggest reward. What would you say yours is?
I think one of the biggest ones was learning how to follow, because then that transpired into learning how to lead.
That's good.
And taking responsibility in my purpose, and being able to be a woman of God, someone who is gentle and kind and who can build her family up and who loves her husband and brings honor to her home. I think that was so good for me to learn and to really see what it's supposed to look like and what a home and a family is really supposed to look like, and being able to have the fruit of the Spirit. That's kind of why we even named this Bible study, that's why we named this podcast She's Fruitful. Well, our Bible study too, so it goes hand in hand. But yeah, that's because it's so evident. You can clearly see when someone truly loves God. He says you will know them by their fruit, the fruit that they produce. The Holy Spirit will show something, and it'll look different than how the world looks. The world is so self-seeking and envious, and that's when we get the murder and the strife and all these things. That's from the world. It's not from God. And being able to hear God's voice and get direction from him, that's so amazing to me, because he speaks to me. And it's, people think that sounds so crazy.
Yeah.
But that, like, people give the conscience the credit. Oh, it's just your conscience is just telling you. Like, no, like, you're created in the image of God. He speaks to you. He will give you, if you consult him, he says pray about everything.
Yeah.
And when you do, he answers you. There are times when I am at a party or something like that, and I'm trying to represent God well, and it's just so heavy and so, like, hard, because I have all this temptation, all these distractions, and I walk away and I pray and I talk to God, and he fills me and he reminds me of the plan. Like, I'm here to shine Jesus's light, and that's my purpose here. And it doesn't matter where you are, no matter what situation you're in, take that seriously, and he will, like, guide you and lead you and teach you and help you.
Yeah, we're supposed to be that salt and light. We're supposed to be that house at the top of the hill that shines light to all of the city, or that lamp in the house that shines light to everybody in the house. You know, it says in Matthew that when salt loses its purpose, when salt loses its saltiness, it no longer has purpose. So what are we when we don't realize what our purpose is? We no longer have any purpose. So going to these places or these parties or events where people are like, oh, why are you going to that? Sometimes, obviously, you shouldn't be doing the things that everybody else is doing, but you can go to a party and show who Jesus is and be that light. And you know, Jesus broke bread with sinners and tax collectors, and he didn't do what they were doing, obviously, but he was pouring life into them and calling them out and calling them for higher. So
yeah, that's what I gained too so much with what you said too, like that fellowship. We hold each other accountable, and that's something that I didn't get before.
Yeah.
When you did whatever, like, it's just that's you, that's your truth, etc. And God's truth is so different from our truth. And when you have spiritually equally yoked in when you're equally yoked, they are trying to live to that same standard that you want to set to yourself. So if I see you lacking, I'm going to tell you, like, hey, Gabby, like, don't do that. And you're going to be like, oh, wow, it's because you love me. I love you. Like, same with God. When he says no to us, it's not him just saying, oh, I don't want you to have fun. I don't want you to do your own thing. It's, I love you. You're praying for a venomous snake.
Yeah. And it says in the Bible, I don't know the address of it, but it says that wounds from a friend can be trusted, but kisses from an enemy brings destruction, I think. I need to find the verse. But it's so true because, your friends are there to help you, and sometimes you don't want to hear what they have to say, but sometimes you need to hear it to grow and to open your eyes. But with the enemy, it just kisses up to you. It tells you what you want to hear. And that's what I saw with a lot of friends that I used to hang out with a lot, that they would just tell me, like, hey, like, no, this is fine, go do it. Or you broke up with your man, let's go to the club and find you another one. And it's like, or let's go party, or let's, whatever the case may be. It was never God-centered and Christ-centered advice. It was never that.
Yeah, and when we're doing whatever we want, we're just taking advantage of people around us, because the most loving thing that you can do for your family, for your friends, is to put Jesus first, because ultimately those people in your life are a gift from God. And putting God first is going to teach you ways to love that I wouldn't know naturally. That hence why my past relationships didn't work out, or I was looking for the wrong things. Yeah. And that's another thing. Now I don't look at the outside. Like, even God says I look at the heart. Like, I am not looking at, how much money you have or how good looking you are. I'm looking to see your character. Can you lead me? Do you have strength? Like, are you gentle and quiet and understanding, but also can protect me and care for me? And that's why I'm so thankful for what I have now. Like, my boyfriend now is amazing, and compared to what I've had before, and my standard being so low, I now can see what it's like to be loved by someone who can truly love you and love you properly. And I have the capacity and I have the understanding to love him the way he needs to be loved. Yeah. And so now, growing together with both of us doing our part and having Christ in the center, nothing can pull you away from that.
Yeah. Oh, I love that.
I know, God is so good.
Yeah, he is.
What advice would you give to someone who has never thought about giving their life to Jesus?
To soften your heart. There's a few things, but softening your heart and having an open mind. In Matthew chapter 11, verse 25, it says, "At that time, Jesus said, I praise you, Father, Lord of heaven and earth, because you have hidden these things from the wise and learned and revealed them to little children." So he's obviously just not meaning literally only little children. He says it's because he reveals to those who are humble, who are eager to learn, who are open-minded and want, little kids. You see them and they just want to learn and discover new things. And that's what he says, that he reveals to those who are humble and eager to learn, and that have that spirit of just wanting to discover and learn new things. I also believe that asking questions and seeking understanding. If you have questions, ask. It says in Hebrews chapter 4, verse 6, "My people are destroyed from lack of knowledge." A lot of people are ignorant of things of the Bible. They don't really know what they're talking about. And if they have questions, they don't really go and look for the answers. They just read the story of Jonah being swallowed by a whale or like a big fish, and they're like, what in the world? Like, that didn't happen. Or, the whole story about Abraham and Isaac. They read that and they're just so shook that happened. But they just read that, but they don't study it and see why that happened. They just read it on the surface, when there's actually so much to learn about these stories. When I struggled with intellectual spiritual warfare, I looked for answers and I found them. In Matthew chapter 6 verse 7, it says, "Seek and you will find." And I'm not joking, I found my answers. And sometimes you won't find the answers, but you have to understand that we are not meant to be all-knowing. Only God is all-knowing, and we're not meant to know everything. There are scientists out there that say, like, all I know is that I know nothing.
Just on that note, like, God isn't scared of your questions. It's funny because as people, we go to other people for answers. And God's like, come to me, ask me those questions, and ask me with an open heart. Don't ask to prove your point, because so many people have done that. That's why you have so many other religions and twisted religions. They take the word of God and they twist it and they make it to what they want to hear. They're not actually trying to hear what the Bible has to say and God's truth, and want to genuinely apply it to their life and want to genuinely hear what God has to say.
Yeah.
And I think a lot of the times too, people are so content where they're at that they don't want to ask the questions. They're content where they are, and they are content with not changing in their habits and their patterns and in their cycles. That why would they need to? Because if they did start looking and they did start asking those hard questions, like, where do I go when I die? Like, is there a God? Like, all of these things. And we as people, we make excuses to cope with these things and just ignore it. And you said earlier how the enemy keeps us distracted. He will keep you distracted until you're off this earth, and now you never had a chance to even give your life to Jesus or to even learn about God. Now it's too late.
Yeah.
But the beautiful thing about God, too, is when you get to that point, and no matter how old you are, no matter where you're at in this walk and in this life, He's always ready to forgive us and to take us.
I agree. And whenever I was suffering from, spiritual warfare, there was the day that I got baptized, and I never doubted the existence of God, ever. Like, that was never a thought of me. I always knew He existed. The day that I got baptized, I started doubting His existence. I'm like, I would pray in this voice, and it was an intrusive, impulsive voice. It was not my voice, but it really led me to doubt. It would say, like, nobody is listening onto the other side of the prayer, or you're so weird for this, like, there's nobody listening to you, this doesn't exist. And so instead of me, like, just believing that and going off astray, I took that doubt, and it was curiosity. I wanted to know more, and I ended up studying the Bible, and I even looked into and studied other religions, and I started to realize that the more I studied other religions, the more I realized that Christ is the truth, the way, and the life. There's no other explanation. And if I didn't go down that rabbit hole of looking, and obviously I would pray. I was like, I don't want to be a Thomas, God. I do not want to be a Thomas. Help me, help my unbelief, because I believe. But God would reveal to me when I would study scripture, when I would study other religions, when I would study science. He would reveal it to me in ways that I could never imagine. So when you seek, you will find. When you ask answers, they will be answered. Or when you ask questions, they will be answered. So yeah, I truly just believe that you should ask questions. It's okay to doubt, but doubt towards belief. Don't doubt towards unbelief, because, like, let's say if I did decide that I don't believe anymore, there's going to be questions in my mind that there's so undeniable evidence that there is a God that exists. You cannot deny that. There's evidence. And so if I were to say, like, okay, I don't believe anymore, I'm going to know that's a lie. That's going to be in my mind, and I'm going to be like, no, that's not true. So I always, if I do have some type of doubt, I ask God about it, and He always reveals to me, always. So yeah.
Something that our lead pastor at our campus always says is the gamble. If I live my entire life saying there's no God, and I die and I'm risen and I'm confronted in front of a God, and He's saying, like, why didn't you believe? Like, you had every opportunity to, looking at the world around you. Or I decided to live my life saying there is a God, and I raised my kids in the Bible, and I loved my wife, and I loved my family, and I was generous, and I tried to bear fruit, and then I died, and there is a God. Like, I hear, well done, good and faithful servant, rather than leave, like, I never knew you, you evildoer.
Yeah.
imagine. Like, the gamble is just too great.
Yeah.
And I guess my answer would kind of go along those lines, is not to base your opinion of God off of a person.
Mm-hmm.
Don't get because people have been hurt, like same with by the church, you know, like if I were to just judge God off of what people do, or even lukewarm Christians, because I'm guilty of this, like I'm sitting here claiming to be a Christian and not living that way, and it led people away from God. Like, please don't base your opinion of God off me. Please don't, because I will fail you. I will fail
perfect.
you. Look at Jesus.
People, yeah.
Always fix your eyes on Jesus, the perfecter of faith.
Mm-hmm.
Fix your eyes on him and focus on the kingdom of heaven, and all these things will be added to you as well.
Yeah.
And it's just like reading the Bible for yourself, because so many people have an opinion of God, so many people have an opinion of the Bible, but no one has sat there and picked it up for themselves. Sometimes when I'm having these, you know, faith-based conversations with people and they have so much negativity to say against the Bible, I sit there and I used to fight it, and I used to try to stand up for God, and it would get me angry. Now I just ask a simple question: well, have you read the Bible?
Yep.
And if they say, most of the time it's no, and if they say yes, I'm like, okay, did you really read it, or did you read a page or two and then base your opinion off of that?
Genesis has so much to reveal to you. It really does. Like, even if you start with Genesis, that's how I'm starting. A lot of people start with the Gospels. But just reading scripture, and not just reading it, but actually understanding it and studying it. Whenever I read, and we could cut this out, but whenever I read about when God told Abraham to circumcise the Jews, you know, and to circumcise his son, and it had to be on the 8th day, and they did it because God told them to. And these people had no knowledge of science or the medicine world, right? This is like 2,000 years ago, or no, even more. But they had no knowledge of that. And now, like recent findings, it shows that the reason why when babies get circumcised at 8 days old is because vitamin K is at its highest. So if you do it before or after, they can either die and bleed out, or they can die from blood clots. And you have to do it on that 8th day. And only a God, all-knowing, at that time was able to tell a community, to tell Abraham that you have to circumcise your kid at 8 days old. Like that, when you study the Bible and like understand that is just crazy, and just so beautiful. I've fallen in love with the Bible and understanding it.
Absolutely. And that just goes back to people saying, when people claim science, like my dad, like he had read the Bible, but he read it with such a closed heart, and he leaned more towards science. But now, like thinking back, I'm like, science just shows how God did it. Looking at science, looking at the world, it shows that an intelligent, all-knowing, omniscient, something outside of time, space, and matter had to be existing beforehand. And what was it?
Yeah.
Like, God was dependent on his own. Like, I look at creation and I'm like, okay, that makes so much sense, knowing that there's a God. Looking at even looking at trees at a microscope and hearing things like, you know, the rocks cry out to God. And dissecting that verse and realizing everything emits a sound wave. Yeah. So, like, literally, the rocks cry out to God. Yeah. And it blows my mind. I'm just like, God, you're so true and you're so faithful.
Yeah, that's why Paul says when he's writing the letter to the Romans, and he's like, everything's right in front of you. What more do you need? You don't need God to come give you a sign.
So some advice I'd also just give is to reflect. Take a minute to take an account of your life, how things are going, in the direction that you're going. And we should be careful about every step that we take and where it's leading us, and be mindful of these things and see what kind of fruit you're producing. Yeah. Seeing what the people in your life are, you know, leading you to as well.
No, yeah, I agree, because community is everything. You know, iron sharpens iron. So if you're not having people that can literally pick you up when you cannot, because in this life, you will encounter things that you don't want to get out of bed for months or weeks. And you need people that are going to be there to tell you who you are, whose you are, your purpose, and that you can keep going. You need people like that. So yeah, I think community is extremely important.
Yeah, and all the things that weigh us down, and we go to people to also, because there's a flip side to that. Sometimes we're filling people with so much that they can't take, but God can take it. God can take all the sorrow, all the tears, all the pain. He can take it, and he can show you what to do with it. Because like you said earlier, there's always a purpose to our pain.
Yeah, I agree.
And with that being said, thank you everyone who decided to watch and who took the time to hear our testimonies and to just see everything that God is doing in our life and everything that he will do in the future. It means the world to us, and we're just so excited.
Yeah, and just know that everybody is welcome. We do not judge, and we have done some crazy things in our lifetime, and God met us where we were at, and I promise you he will meet you where you're at. So yeah.
Thank you.
With that being said, thank you for watching. Bye-bye.